Welcome to the Hindu Daily.
It's great to be here. We have a really packed set of stories to get through today. 12 distinct articles, and they really do cover a huge range of topics.
They really do. Our mission today is to unpack all 12 of them, and the scope is, well, it's honestly incredible. We're going to be talking about everything from the gaping holes in India's mental health infrastructure all the way to tigers terrorizing tobacco farmers.
And even I saw the restoration of a cult classic film that was almost lost.
Exactly. It's a really diverse mix. We've got hard data, we've got geopolitical tension, scientific breakthroughs, and some deep cultural analysis as well.
So it's a bit of everything.
A bit of everything. So here's our roadmap for you. We're going to start with the FAQ section that covers mental health, traditional medicine, and aviation safety. Then we'll move into a profile of a diplomat on the very edge of war. We've got a science section on hidden hearing loss and bamboo of all things, then a spotlight on rural India, and we'll wrap it all up with the magazine section, which covers arts, culture, and business.
All right, let's dive right in.
Okay, let's kick things off with that FAQ section. The first article is titled, India's Mental Health Crisis and Infrastructure Deficit. And honestly, calling it a deficit feels like a massive understatement when you actually look at the numbers.
It's more of a chasm than a deficit, really. If you look at the data, the experts cited aren't just concerned, they're calling this an absolute emergency. India currently accounts for nearly 1/3 of all global suicides.
1/3. Let that sink in.
1/3. I mean, it's a number that's almost impossible to really comprehend.
It's a chilling statistic. And you have to think about the scale of the human tragedy behind a number like that.
You do. And perhaps what's even more concerning is the demographic it hits hardest. Suicide is a leading cause of death for young people aged 15 to 29.
We're talking about people in the prime of their life, the future workforce, the next generation.
Exactly. And beyond the obvious and profound human tragedy, the source also points out the economic cost because, sometimes policymakers only really listen when you put a price tag on a problem.
Right, a dollar sign or a rupee sign can get attention.
Unfortunately, yes. And the World Health Organization estimates that between 2012 and 2030, the economic loss just from mental health conditions in India will be around $1.03 trillion. Trillion. With a T. And we have to unpack what that means. It's not just, hospital bills. It's lost productivity. It's brilliant people dropping out of the workforce because of anxiety or depression.
It's family members having to become caregivers.
Precisely. They have to quit their own jobs to become full-time caregivers because the state infrastructure just isn't there to support them. It creates this huge ripple effect that, frankly, drags down the entire economy.
So $1 trillion problem. Surely we have the professional workforce to tackle that.
We absolutely do not. And this is the core bottleneck. India has about 0.75 psychiatrists per 100,000 people. The WHO recommends a minimum of 3.
So we're at a quarter of the recommended number.
A quarter. We're operating at a massive, massive deficit for a country of 1.4 billion people. I mean, you're talking about a shortage of tens of thousands of professionals.
So we have an established crisis. What's being done? The article mentions some budget updates. Is the government finally waking up to this?
Well, on paper, yes, there is some movement. The budget did announce the establishment of a second National Institute of Mental Health and Neurosciences, a second NIMHANS up in North India, and they're also upgrading institutions in Ranchi and Tezpur.
Okay, that sounds positive. More hospitals, more institutes.
Right.
But I feel a but coming.
There is a massive but. Neha Kirpal, who's a mental health expert cited in the source, points out the total mental health allocation is still under 2% of the total health budget.
Under 2%. For a problem causing 1/3 of global suicides. The math doesn't add up.
It doesn't. And the critique goes deeper. It's about something called the tertiary trap.
The tertiary trap. Break that down for me.
So tertiary care means these huge, specialized, high-tech hospitals, like NIMHANS. They're fantastic if you have a very rare neurological condition and you can afford to travel to a major city to get treatment.
Right.
But 95% of the mental health gap is at the grassroots level. It's the farmer in a village dealing with crippling depression. It's the student in a small town struggling with exam anxiety. A shiny new institute in a big city just doesn't help them.
They need a clinic down the street, not a research center 3 states away.
Precisely. So when all the funding flows to the very top of the pyramid, the base just crumbles. We need community-based care. The article does mention Telemenes, the toll-free helpline, that's 14416, and also the integration of mental health services into the AYUSH wellness centers.
And those seem like steps in the right direction.
Yeah.
A helpline is accessible from anywhere with a phone.
They are definitely positive steps toward that community model. But the expert consensus in the article is that until the bulk of the funding shifts from, big buildings to people on the ground, counselors, social workers, community psychologists, that 95% access gap is going to remain. To use an analogy, we're building cathedrals when what we really need are local chapels.
That's a powerful analogy. Now, staying with healthcare but shifting gears completely, while mental health is, as you said, struggling for scraps, and other sectors seems to be absolutely booming. Article 2 is Global Expansion and Scientific Modernization of AYUSH Healthcare.
Yeah, this is a fascinating contrast. While we were just talking about a deficit, here we're talking about aggressive global expansion. This is all about taking traditional Indian medicine, Ayurveda, yoga, Unani, Siddha, and homeopathy, and turning it into a global economic force.
And the numbers here are very, very different.
Oh, they are. The 2026-27 budget allocation hit over 4,400 crore rupees. And that includes a huge 66% hike just for the national AYUSH mission. But the real story, the headline here, isn't just the money. It's the diplomatic push behind it.
You're talking about the free trade agreement with the EU.
Yes, the India-EU free trade agreement. This is a potential game changer. For decades, Indian Ayurvedic doctors have really struggled to practice in Europe. Their degrees weren't recognized. Their products were often stopped at customs. It was essentially a closed door.
And this FTA basically kicks that door open.
Well, it creates a framework to do that. It allows Indian AYUH practitioners to practice in EU countries without the specific, very restrictive regulations they've faced before. And crucially, it allows for mutual recognition of lab results and safety certifications.
Explain that a bit more. Why is mutual recognition so important?
Well, imagine you're an Ayurvedic company making a specific herbal supplement. Before, you might have to pay for expensive safety testing in India. Then you ship it to, say, France. And the French authorities might say, sorry, we don't trust your labs. You have to test it all over again here.
Which would kill your profit margin.
It would destroy it.
Yeah.
Now, if an accredited Indian lab says a product is safe, the EU says, okay, we trust you. It also provides legal guarantees for opening wellness centers across that whole 27-country bloc.
That is huge for business. And domestically, they're modernizing as well.
Aggressively. They're building 3 new all-India institutes of Ayurveda that are modeled on the prestigious AIIMS hospitals. They've even launched something called Bharat Vistar, which is a multilingual AI assistant for farmers who are growing medicinal plants.
So using AI to help grow ancient herbs.
It's a very cyberpunk blend of old and new, isn't it?
It is. However, we can't ignore the controversy here. The article highlights a pretty intense debate with the Indian Medical Association, the IMA.
Ah, yes, the mixopathy debate. This has been brewing for a while now. The IMA is very, very critical of the government's decision to allow Ayurveda students to perform certain types of surgeries.
Surgeries, like major operations.
That's the contention. The government has permitted a list of specific procedures for postgraduate Ayurveda students. The IMA calls this legalized quackery. Their argument is that surgery isn't just about cutting. It requires very specific training in anatomy, physiology, anesthesia, things that are central to allopathy but may not be as rigorous in traditional curricula. They're very worried about patient safety.
And speaking of safety, there were also concerns about the products themselves.
Yes, this is a recurring issue. There have been persistent problems with heavy metals, lead, mercury, arsenic being found in some Ayurvedic products. So the tension here is really between ambition and validation. On one side, you have this projected $26.5 billion industry by 2026.
A massive economic opportunity.
Huge. But on the other side, you have this desperate need for rigorous scientific validation, randomized controlled trials, the gold standard to prove safety and efficacy to a global audience. You can't just walk into Germany and say, it's ancient so it works. You need to show them the data.
So it's a clash between economic ambition and scientific standardization, which, speaking of safety standards, or the terrifying lack of them, let's move to Article 3, the Boeing 787 fuel switch safety crisis.
This story, I have to admit, as someone who flies a lot, this one kept me up at night. It's a very specific, very technical failure that has just huge implications. This all happened on February 1st, 2026. An Air India flight, London to Bengaluru.
So set the scene for us. They're on the tarmac at Heathrow, just getting ready to go.
Exactly. They're taxiing out to the runway, the engines are running, and then suddenly the left fuel control switch slips from the run position to cut off.
And for those of us who aren't pilots, what does that switch do?
It's pretty much exactly what it sounds like. It controls the flow of fuel to the engine. If that switch goes to cut off, The engine dies. It just shuts down.
Okay, so the engine cuts out on the ground. That's obviously bad, but at least they're on the ground. The crew noticed this happen.
Oh, they did. They physically touched the switch to check it. They tried to put it back into the run position. It wouldn't latch. It slipped back to cut off. It took them 3 attempts to get it to physically stay in the run position.
3 attempts. I mean, that sounds like a broken part.
Any mechanic on the ground would tell you that's a massive red flag. But here's the kicker. After forcing it to latch on the 3rd try, they decided to fly the 8,000-kilometer journey to Bengaluru anyway.
Wait.
What?
They flew an 8,000-kilometer journey with a critical fuel switch that had just failed to lock? That seems incredibly bold, especially considering the context the article gives about a previous crash.
Bold is one word for it. Reckless might be another. And yes, the context here is crucial. The June 2025 crash of Air India Flight 171 is still under investigation, and these exact switches are a key part of that inquiry. The Safety Matters Foundation even cited a 2018 FAA alert, that's 8 years ago now, warning that these switches on the 787 can malfunction and move inadvertently.
So this is a known issue. This isn't a surprise.
It is a known vulnerability, yes.
But what was the official response? Did the regulators come down hard on this?
The DGCA, that's the Indian regulator, they issued a rejoinder that essentially defended the crew's decision. They claimed the switch was stable after verification and that the crew monitored it closely during the flight. They said no alarms were triggered, Boeing also recommended checks, and the Air India fleet was inspected.
But the expert insight in the article from Professor David Cerulli suggests this shouldn't happen at all, right? This isn't a situation where you just monitor it.
No, absolutely not. Professor Cerulli's expertise is in the human-to-machine interface. He explains that these kinds of critical switches are specifically designed with a pull and twist motion.
Like a child-proof cap on a medicine bottle?
Exactly that. That complexity is there to prevent accidental movement. If it's just slipping on its own, that strongly suggests the internal locking mechanism is physically broken or worn down.
So the real debate is, was this just a one-off glitch or a fundamental mechanical failure?
That's the core question. The regulator seems to be treating it like a procedural hiccup. Oh, they checked it, it was fine. But the experts are asking if this is a human factor issue or a much deeper mechanical flaw in the aircraft's design. Because if those switches can wear out and slip into cutoff mid-flight, well, you do not want to be over the Atlantic when that happens.
No, you absolutely do not. It's a sobering thought about the normalization of deviance, where you accept a small failure because nothing bad happened this time, until one day it does.
That is the classic trap in aviation safety.
Let's move to Section 2, our profile section. Article 4 is titled Abbas Araghchi, Diplomacy on the Brink.
This focuses on Iran's foreign minister, Abbas Araghchi, and the source describes his current position as one of the most difficult diplomatic jobs in the world. And honestly, looking at his portfolio, I do not envy him for a second.
Talk about high stakes. The backdrop here is incredibly intense. We're not just talking about trade deals or minor disputes.
No, not at all. We are talking about existential threats. You have to look at the scenario. Iran just faced massive domestic protests in January 2025, where an estimated 3,000 people were killed. The regime is shaking from the inside. Then externally, there was a 12-day war with the U.S. and Israel back in June 2025.
And now the political landscape in the West has shifted dramatically again.
Right. Donald Trump is back in the White House. The rhetoric has shifted from diplomatic containment to things like locked and loaded. He's sending what he calls a massive armada to the region. The pressure cooker is absolutely whistling.
And right in the middle of all this is Araghchi. So who is he? Is he a hardliner, a revolutionary cleric?
He's a fascinating figure because he's sort of a contradiction. He isn't a screaming demagogue. He actually holds a PhD from the University of Kent in the UK.
A British PhD?
Yes. And get this, his thesis supervisor was a scholar of Marxism. Araghchi's whole academic background is in reconciling Western democratic principles with Islamic political thought. He wrote his thesis on whether these two worlds can actually coexist. He's fluent in English, Arabic, and Persian.
He sounds, by training at least, like a bridge builder. A diplomat in the truest sense of the word.
He is. He was the chief negotiator for the original 2015 nuclear deal, the JCPOA. He knows the West. He understands the language of Brussels and Washington. But now he's trying to balance two completely impossible things.
What's the core dilemma he's facing?
He needs a deal. Desperately. Iran's economy is just crushed by sanctions. Inflation is rampant. To survive domestically, he needs to get those sanctions lifted. But to survive politically within the regime and to deter an attack from Trump, he needs to project strength. He used the phrase, keeping a finger on the trigger.
So he has to look like he's ready for war in order to prevent a war, while simultaneously begging for peace to fix the economy.
That's the tightrope he's walking, and the disconnect in the negotiations is getting wider. The article mentions that Araghchi wants to talk specifically and only about the nuclear issues. Let's limit the nukes, you lift the sanctions. But the U.S., under Trump, wants to broaden the scope. They want to talk about Iran's ballistic missiles, their regional militias.
Which are the very things Iran considers its insurance policy.
They're its defense mechanism, exactly. So it's a classic diplomatic deadlock. Araghchi is trying to use his academic skills of reconciliation in a room where the other side is holding a hammer. The tragedy of his profile is that he might be the most capable man for peace, but he's stuck in a moment that seems designed for war.
Walking a tightrope over a war zone feels like the perfect description. Let's shift gears completely now to Section 3. Science. Article 5 is the silent crisis of hidden hearing loss.
I found this one really unsettling because I think a lot of us might actually have this and just not know it. We tend to think of hearing loss as, a binary thing. Either you can hear or you can't.
Right. I think of my grandfather turning the TV volume way up.
Exactly. That's called threshold shift. It's like turning the volume knob down on the world. Everything just gets quieter. But this article is about cochlear synaptopathy, which has the much more user-friendly name, hidden hearing loss.
Okay, so what's the difference?
Well, think of standard hearing loss as a volume issue. Hidden hearing loss is a clarity issue. The analogy in the article is great. It's like having a damaged cable or signal interference. The volume is fine, you can hear that someone is speaking, but the signal is fuzzy, it's indistinct, especially when there's background noise.
So the classic cocktail party effect, but on a clinical level.
Precisely. If you're in a quiet room, you might understand a conversation perfectly fine. But put you in a busy restaurant or on a noisy street corner, and suddenly all the voices just blend into a wall of noise. You can't distinguish the words.
The article mentions a study from Ghent University. What did they find?
So they studied attendees of music festivals. And this is the really scary part. They found that the damage actually happens to the synapses. Those are the connections between the ear and the brain before it happens to the tiny hair cells that detect sound.
And why does that distinction matter so much?
It matters because standard hearing tests, the audiogram where you sit in a booth and raise your hand when you hear a beep, they only test the hair cells.
Yeah.
They test your sensitivity, your threshold. They do not test the synapses or the clarity of the signal. So you could walk into an ENT's office, pass a hearing test with flying colors, be told your hearing is perfect, and yet still be unable to understand a conversation in a bar.
That is terrifying. It means our primary diagnostic tool is completely missing the problem.
Completely. The study found that the muffled hearing that people experience the morning after a loud concert isn't just temporary fatigue. It's a sign that the auditory system was pushed past its capacity and that some of those synapses might be permanently frayed.
And the article highlights a specific concern for India here.
Yes, noise pollution. We have festivals, constant traffic, construction, weddings with these massive speaker systems, and the decibel limits are almost never enforced. The article suggests this type of synaptic damage is likely widespread across the Indian population, and it's completely underdiagnosed because our testing methods are just outdated.
From hearing loss to something a bit more hopeful. Article 6 is bamboo, Asia's green gold and sustainable superfood.
This is a great example of reevaluating something we completely take for granted. We usually think of bamboo as, construction material, scaffolding, maybe some furniture, or food for pandas.
Right, but the article calls it the superfood.
It does. There's new research from Anglia Ruskin University that's highlighting its nutritional value. Apparently, bamboo shoots and seeds are packed with amino acids, vitamins A, B6, and E. The research shows it has benefits for regulating blood sugar and lipid levels, and it's very high in antioxidants.
So we might be seeing bamboo shoot smoothies on cafe menus soon.
It's possible. But the article also touches on the industrial side of it. It's not just for eating. They call it green gold for a very good reason.
The industrial applications were really surprising. I saw a mention of full-length glass mirrors. How on earth do you make a mirror out of bamboo?
It sounds like alchemy, doesn't it? It has to do with the high silica content in bamboo fibers. With very advanced processing and polishing techniques, you can create a surface that is reflective enough to function as a mirror. It's a sustainable alternative to traditional glass and metal manufacturing, which is incredibly energy intensive.
That is just incredible innovation. And there's an energy component, too.
Yes, there's a biorefinery in Assam that's producing ethanol from bamboo. And we're seeing it used for everything from disposable cutlery as a great alternative to plastic, all the way to high-end textiles.
And policy-wise, India's pushing this pretty hard.
Very hard. It's called the National Bamboo Mission 2025. The main goal is to encourage farmers to grow bamboo on non-forest lands. So think about the borders of farms, along canal banks, on wasteland.
Why specifically there?
Because it provides a secondary income for the farmer without taking up their prime land for food crops. Plus, it acts as a windbreak. It stops soil erosion. And now they have a growing market to sell it to, whether it's for food, ethanol, or even mirrors. The article notes India is already a top 3 global exporter right alongside China and Vietnam. It's a crop that solves multiple problems at once: nutrition, sustainable materials, and rural income.
Speaking of rural income and the changing face of agriculture, let's move to our spotlight section. Article 7 is Migrant Hands and Shifting Fields in Telangana Agriculture.
This is a really human look at how the labor market in rural India is shifting. It opens with the story of a man named Fulender Thakur.
Right, he migrated from Bihar to Telangana to work on a grape farm. And now he's essentially a labor contractor, bringing other young men from his own village down south to work.
His story illustrates a massive demographic trend. We often talk about urbanization, but this is about the void that gets left behind. The local youth in Telangana are leaving agriculture. They're getting educated, they're moving into the gig economy, driving for Uber, delivering for Swiggy, or they have their own small landholdings they don't want to leave to go work on someone else's farm.
So the local labor force has effectively vanished.
Exactly. It's created a vacuum. And physics abhors a vacuum. That space is being filled by migrant workers from states like Bihar, Chhattisgarh, and Odisha.
What are the economics of that? Is it just about finding cheaper labor?
Not entirely. The wages mentioned are around 9,000 to 11,000 rupees a month, plus shelter and electricity, which is a decent wage for rural labor. But what's really interesting is who is hiring them. It's not just the old, wealthy, feudal landlords. It's a new class of tenant farmers.
Explain that dynamic for us.
So these are entrepreneurs, really. People who are leasing 20 or 30 acres of land at a time. They're betting big on high-value cash crops. They absolutely cannot afford for the work to stop, so they rely on this migrant labor because it's stable and reliable. The migrants live on the farm. They're available 204/7.
The article also mentions a fascinating shift in skills. We tend to think of migrant labor as just unskilled work, like digging or carrying.
That is a stereotype that is rapidly becoming outdated. The article highlights the rise of specialized teams. You have dedicated pruning teams or trellis teams.
Like roaming specialists?
Exactly. These skilled groups travel across different states, Telangana, Andhra, Karnataka, following the seasons. They know exactly how to prune a mango tree for maximum yield, or exactly how to set up the trellis system for grapes. They're becoming skilled technicians.
And they're using technology to do it.
Right. They're using video interviews on WhatsApp to market their skills to farmers before they even arrive. It's the digitization of the informal labor market.
It's an incredible story of adaptation. But there is a dark side mentioned at the end.
Yes, the Social Security gap. These workers are essentially invisible to the state where they work. There's no insurance, no health coverage. The source mentions a really grim detail. If a worker dies, their colleagues have to pool their own money just to transport the body back home to their family.
That is just a stark reminder of the precarity of their lives. They're essential to the economy, but they're treated as disposable.
Precisely. They are keeping the agricultural engine running, but the social safety net just hasn't stretched far enough to cover them.
From the fields of Telangana to the fields of Andhra Pradesh, but with a much more dangerous twist. Article 8 is the tiger in the tobacco fields.
This story, it really does play out like a thriller. We're in the Iluru district of Andhra Pradesh. The setting is crucial here. It's January, which is peak tobacco harvest season. The fields are thick with tall crops.
And into this purely agricultural setting walks a tiger.
A subadult male tiger that has wandered all the way from the Tadoba Andari Reserve in Maharashtra. And this isn't just a brief sighting where people take a few photos. This tiger is causing absolute chaos. It's killing cattle at a highly unusual rate, sometimes 2 per night.
2 per night? That seems very aggressive.
It's extremely high. It suggests a young, perhaps inexperienced hunter that's taking the easiest prey it can find. It hasn't attacked any humans, but the fear alone has completely paralyzed the local economy.
We need to explain why the timing of this is so critical. Why can't they just stay home and wait for the tiger to leave?
Because tobacco is a very fickle crop. The leaves have an incredibly specific harvest window. If you delay by even a week, the leaves overripen. They start to spot. They turn yellow. The price plummets from 300 rupees a kilogram for high-grade leaf down to maybe 120 rupees.
That's more than a 50% loss in income.
Exactly. For a small farmer, that is the difference between making a profit and falling into bankruptcy. But the workers are refusing to enter the fields. I mean, can you imagine standing in waist-high tobacco plants knowing a tiger is lurking somewhere nearby? You wouldn't go in.
The story of the woman Karamba Mama really struck me. She went to work despite the fear.
That was the emotional core of the story for me, too. She told a reporter she was terrified, but she needed that 300 rupee daily wage. The economic desperation literally outweighed the primal fear of being eaten by a predator. It's a harrowing choice to have to make every single morning.
But stepping back from the human drama, the expert analysis in the article suggests this isn't some freak event. This might be the new normal.
It is. This tiger is what they call a dispersing subadult. Male tigers, when they hit adolescence, they get kicked out of their mother's territory. They have to go find their own space, their own food, their own mates.
So it's a teenager looking for its first apartment.
Essentially, yes. A very dangerous teenager. But the apartments, the forests, are full, so it wanders. And the experts have identified what they call a functional corridor. It's a 600-kilometer stretch of land between Tadoba in Maharashtra and the Papakonda National Park in Andhra.
A tiger highway.
Exactly. And as our conservation efforts succeed and tiger numbers go up, that highway is going to get busier. We are going to see more and more of these conflicts. The article argues that we need interstate coordination, Madhya Pradesh, Maharashtra, AP, Telangana, to manage this corridor. We can't just react when a tiger shows up in a tobacco field. We need to proactively manage the route.
So it's a complex problem where successful conservation actually leads to more human and wildlife conflict.
It's the paradox of success.
That's a perfect segue into our final section, the magazine section. We're shifting from the wild to the cultural. Article 9 is Restoring Annie, Arundhati Roy, and the Lingua Franca of Freedom.
This is a beautiful piece of nostalgia, really. It's all about the restoration of the 1989 film In Which Annie Gives It Those Ones.
I love that title. In Which Annie Gives It Those Ones. It sounds like a complete inside joke.
It is an inside joke. Giving it those ones was apparently student slang at the Delhi School of Architecture back in the 70s. It meant doing a specific eccentric routine or pretending to be busy when you weren't.
The film was written by Arundhati Roy and directed by Pradeep Krishan. For a long time, it was kind of a lost treasure, wasn't it?
It was a true cult classic. For years, you could only find these grainy, terrible quality copies on YouTube. But now it's been fully restored in 4K, and it's set in an architecture school in Delhi in 1974.
And it captures a very specific moment in Indian cultural history.
It really does. It celebrated Indian English, or Hinglish, at a time when it was often mocked by the establishment. It just captured that specific vibe of being a student. You're broke, you're idealistic, but you're also kind of aimless and messy and figuring things out.
There's a fantastic trivia bit in the article about Shah Rukh Khan's role in the film.
Yes. This is amazing. Shah Rukh Khan has a minor role as a student, and the director, Pradeep Krishan, says he gave him such a small part because he didn't stand out as a good actor at the time.
Can you even imagine rejecting SRK?
It just goes to show you never know.
Yeah.
But beyond the trivia, Arundhati Roy has a more somber reflection on the film today.
What did she say?
She talks about how the film represented a kind of radical freedom, but she defines that freedom in an unusual way. She says it was the freedom of having no money and no ambition, the freedom to just be.
And she contrasts that with the present day.
Yes. She says that today, everything is negotiated with a hammer. The political climate, the social pressures, it's all so heavy. She feels that lightness of the 70s and 80s is gone. The film is a window into a gentler, scrappier time that perhaps we can't get back to.
From one literary giant to another, Article 10 is Barbara Kingsolver, giving voice to the resilience of survivors.
This focuses on her Pulitzer-winning book, Demon Copperhead. If you haven't read it, it's a modern retelling of Charles Dickens's David Copperfield, but it's set in Appalachia during the opioid crisis.
And there's a literal ghost story behind the book's inception.
Apparently so.
Yeah.
Kingsolver was staying at Bleak House, the actual house where Dickens wrote, and she claims she felt a spirit, or at least an overwhelming presence, telling her to let the child tell the story.
Just as Dickens did with David Copperfield.
Exactly. Dickens used a child narrator to to make the horrors of Victorian poverty palatable to the upper classes, and Kingsolver realized she had to do the same thing.
Why was that so important?
Because of the stigma. She notes that generally people don't want to read about orphans and poverty and eviction. It's depressing. People look away. But they love a survivor story. So by framing it as one boy's journey of surviving the system, she could get people to read about the opioid crisis without them feeling like they were being lectured.
That is a masterclass in narrative strategy. The article also mentions a personal struggle she has, which I found quite moving.
Yes, she has Dupuytren's disease. It's a condition where the tissue in the hand thickens and tightens, causing the fingers to slowly contract into fists.
And she's a writer.
Exactly. She says she can still type, and she can play the piano, but she can no longer hold a pen to sign books for her readers. It's such a poignant detail. A writer whose hands are literally closing up, but who keeps telling these huge, expansive stories.
From the craft of writing to the business of music, Article 11 is The Spotify Paradox, Corporate Control and the Independent Artist.
This is a review of a book by Liz Pelly called Mood Machine. And if you use Spotify, you really need to listen to this. It exposes the central irony of the entire platform.
Which is?
Well, Spotify launched with this narrative of being a democratizing force. They said, we will break to the power of the gatekeepers. We will help the little guys against the big bad record labels.
And what actually happened?
They realized they needed the music catalog, so they partnered with the big three, Sony, Universal, and Warner. They gave them equity in the company. They didn't break the gatekeepers. They just consolidated power with them.
And the payout numbers.
Yeah.
We hear about this all the time, but the article gives specifics.
It's roughly $0.0035 per stream. That's a third of a single cent. You need thousands and thousands of streams just to buy a cup of coffee. But the system is also incredibly opaque. The payments go to the labels, not to the artists directly.
But the article discusses some tactics that sound even shadier than just low pay. What's discovery mode?
This is what Pelly calls digital payola. In the old days, payola was literally bribing a DJ to play your song on the radio. Discovery mode is the algorithmic version of that. Artists can opt in to accept a lower royalty rate in exchange for the algorithm boosting their song in recommendations and playlists.
So you have to pay through a pay cap to get played.
Exactly. It forces artists into a race to the bottom. But the craziest part is what the author calls neo-music.
Neo-music. What on earth is that?
Fake artists.
Fake artists?
Yes. Spotify has been accused of filling its own hugely popular playlists like Peaceful Piano or Deep Focus with tracks produced by people on flat fees or even AI-generated music, all released under fake artist names. You know, the Sleepy Strings Ensemble that doesn't actually exist.
Why do they do that?
Because if they own the music or if they just paid a small flat fee for it, they don't have to pay out royalties to Sony or Universal or a real indie band every time it's streamed. It dilutes the entire royalty pool. It's just corporate extraction masked as tech innovation.
That is incredibly cynical. Finally, let's look at a real success story in the fashion world to cleanse our palate. Article 12, Anita Dongre, crafting an Indian legacy in Beverly Hills.
This is a really significant cultural milestone. The designer, Anita Dongre, has opened a flagship store on Wilshire Boulevard in Beverly Hills.
And we should be clear, this isn't just a rack in the back of a department store.
No, this is a major standalone flagship store, and she's doing it independently. She is self-funded. She isn't backed by one of the big Western conglomerates like LVMH or Kering. That is incredibly rare in the luxury world.
What does this signal about the market?
The experts in the piece call it the brown is the new black cultural moment. There's a massive shift happening.
In what way?
First, the South Asian diaspora in North America is wealthy, confident, and wants to wear its heritage with pride. They don't want to just blend in anymore. They want luxury that speaks to them. And second, Western consumers are becoming global curious. They're a bit bored of the standard French and Italian luxury codes.
And Anita Dongre's strategy seems to be about blending those two worlds.
Perfectly. Her philosophy is described as local proud and global curious. So the store features pitch-wide hand-painted walls and incredible Indian craft, but the silhouettes of the clothes are contemporary and global. It's not a costume. It's global fashion with a distinctly Indian soul.
So it's about taking Indian heritage and placing it squarely in the center of global luxury retail, not as some exotic side dish, but as the main course.
Precisely. It's a huge statement of confidence.
From mental health deficits to high fashion in Beverly Hills, we really did cover it all today.
It's a reminder of how complex and contradictory the world is. You have these massive structural problems in health and safety, but at the same time, you have these incredible stories of resilience, creativity, and global expansion.
Absolutely. And that is a wrap for this deep dive.
Indeed.
Thank you for listening. If you want to provide suggestions, please contact on the Twitter handle given in the episode description. As always, we are eager to hear what our listeners want to be informed about. We wish you a great day.